Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest needs no introduction, but I am required to do that because I think I need to do that. Kyle, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Good gracious, we go back a long way.
Little ways, yeah.
Kyle,
I remember when you had less gray hair and I had none.
I remember a lot of things, and then some things I wish I didn't remember, and some things I don't remember. But this is Kyle Whitmire with AL.com. They've been called a lot of things over the years, but they are AL.com these days. Kyle is an opinion, I guess I would call
State political columnist is my official title, yes.
And lately, you've been spending some time in the courtroom, I believe.
I have. It's funny how you write about politics and you wind up at a courthouse. It's either because someone's going to jail or because someone's suing the state. But
well, my philosophy is if it weren't for lawyers, we wouldn't need lawyers.
That is very true.
So, because we keep fighting the same battle over and over again. Is what it seems like to me. And of course, we're talking about the I can't even say the word.
Redistricting.
It's a typical.
Or reapportionment, if you really want to get your tongue tied.
Sum it up for us in a grand total of 6 minutes.
Every 10 years, the state is supposed, after the census is taken, the state is supposed to redraw its district lines for congressional seats, for seats in the legislature, for school board seats, and it's always a fight. It's always a struggle. But this year, some plaintiffs came forward and said, look, there are enough black people in Alabama. It's about 28% of the population, that if you look at 7 seats, there should be, there's already one district where they're in the majority, what we call a majority minority district, which sounds kind of like a contradiction, but that's what it is, what it's called. And they said there should be enough here for a second one. They sued. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The state of Alabama, Solicitor General Edmund McCord was very adamant and that the state really didn't think the state should have to do this. And I think they believed that the state, believed that this was their opportunity to sort of gut what was left of the Voting Rights Act and get out from underneath the Voting Rights Act. Well, the Supreme Court, to a lot of people's surprise, including mine, ruled against the state of Alabama and said, no, you need to go back to the table and you need to draw a second majority black district. It doesn't necessarily have to be a majority black district, but it has to be enough African Americans in that district that they should have the opportunity to vote for someone who has a chance of winning. Mm-hmm. And the state of Alabama called a special session. They sat down and they said, no, we're not going to do it. And they drew a map that looks very much like their old map. It's slightly better, not a lot better. And it is now back in court as we're talking now. We're waiting on the lower court to rule. But everyone's expectation is, no matter what the decision is at the lower court level, it will go back to the United States Supreme Court, and maybe I'll get another trip to Washington D.C. out of it to watch it there again.
Fascinating experience, isn't it?
It is. It is. The court building there is a beautiful place. I like to say when you walk into the U.S. Supreme Court, you're literally walking on Alabama, because the judicial building there is made from marble that came from Sylacauga. So if you walk in the hall, you're walking on Alabama.
Well, Alabama's been walked on a good bit. So let's break that redistricting down. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is a fair representative group to be able to vote for a congressperson that represents them. Right. Which right now, what you're trying to get at is we need, of our seats, our total number of seats, which are how many right
7.
Now? We should have 28% of that 7, at least, represented by the African American community, or a district that includes a majority of the minority.
Right, so that they can elect who, someone that represents their interests.
And right now,
And it doesn't even have to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 50% or greater. It could be 45, 48. But what the state has tried to do is say that 38 or 39% is enough, and they got it there. And there's so much minutia that's tied up in this. It's really been an education for me, learning how this whole process works. But that's part of journalism, right? You go into something like the first day of class, and then you have to learn everything about it, and then go out and explain it to other people like you're an expert. And but the frustrating thing here is, and we saw this in the state's last appearance of court, is how the state of Alabama has just sort of stubbornly refused to do what the courts have asked them to do, to the point that one of the federal judges on this 3-judge panel looked at the state solicitor, that's the state's attorney, and said, how is the state not in open defiance of this court right now? And the state solicitor just kind of hemmed and hawed and then eventually sat down. It was not and 2 of these 3 judges on this panel are Trump appointees. And even they're looking at this going, this what you're trying is not going to work.
Yeah. Well, we shall see.
We shall see.
So we're going to take a short break and come back. We may explore a little bit more about this, or we may go somewhere else. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm speaking with Kyle Whitmire. We're talking about politics in general and voting. And by the way, the redistricting issue, that needs to be in the Kelvinator, so to speak, by November of 24.
Right. I mean, there's a clock that's running here, and one of the things that the plaintiffs are really worried about is that, what happened last time was they filed their complaint, and the Supreme Court said, obviously this is a very serious issue, but we're going to let the state of Alabama use the map it drew because it's too close to Election Day. So we're just going to let that map stay. And what the state seems to be doing is trying something very similar, where they're just trying to run out the clock and get to, and reset it over and over and over again. It'll be interesting to see if the courts let that happen this time.
Yeah.
I think they were very open. They were very open to the state last time. They might not be so much this time.
They'd have to fast track it.
Yes.
So every day I pick up the paper and, see, I'm dating myself. I pick up my tablet to read.
We live in a digital age.
To read what used to be called a paper that I now have to explain.
I still call it that sometimes.
To coworkers' children what that means. It's like an 8-track or a cassette. Nobody knows what those words mean anymore. But somehow, some way, we have a football coach as one of our senators, and it appears to me that Senator Tuberville has created quite a stir with his seemingly unmovable position regarding some things going on in the military.
Right.
And I don't understand how one person can put the brakes on what's happening and why no one can push it forward.
He has the ability, because most of these appointments, they defer. I mean, historically, they've generally deferred to the Department of Defense. Okay, you want to, and to the White House, if you want to make this person a general, we're not going to get in your way of doing that. But they have a long process that they can use for review. Most of the time, they just skip that step because it's laborious. And what what Senator Tuberville has decided is, that he's making an issue.
Can we just call him Coach?
Coach, we can call him Coach. People call him other things. What Coach, he likes being called Coach, has decided is that he is going to invoke that long process for every new appointment or reappointment that comes up, or every new promotion that comes up in the upper branches of the military. And it is really frustrating the Department of Defense, because there are a lot of people who, when you retire, you part of your retirement is based on the position you last held before you left. And so there are people who are they're sort of working their way through that process, who are now sort of like frozen in place. And it's also, there's a question of, is this really respectful of the military, which is something that Coach has always made like one of his points of pride. He likes to talk about his father and his father's service in World War II. And he may or may not have used his charity to benefit veterans. That's still sort of up in the air. But it's something that he's claimed is very important to him. And now he's doing something that conflicts with that image.
But it's wrapped in the abortion issue.
It
because
is.
He's opposed to abortion, and he's
Right.
opposed to the military's rules that they established about how someone in the military who might want or need or be required by
That's right.
whatever event occurred caused them to be pregnant to
Right.
abort a child. And he's opposed.
That's right.
And that's what he's doing. Hold it up. Is it affecting us militarily?
Well,
or is it just about promotions and raises and retirement benefits?
Well, there are a lot of people who, let's talk about who us is. I think it's affecting Alabama, because, this state, and let's just name names, Richard Shelby went through a lot of work to get Space Command located in Huntsville. And the Biden administration very clearly would have preferred to have that in Colorado. It was already based in Colorado. They could just kind of put things on hold for a long time, and just sort of put it in suspended animation there and keep it there, which is where we thought it was going to stay until a few weeks ago. They came out and said, no, actually, we're going to make an affirmative decision here. We are not going to base it in Alabama. We're not going to put it in Huntsville. We're going to lock it down in Colorado.
And that's done.
Probably. I think the GAO is going to do a review. They've agreed to an investigation to see, what criteria changed, because all the previous studies, surveys, whatever you call them, had said Huntsville was the right place for Space Command. But this, politics very much factors into these decisions. And at that moment, when a more, I'll just say, adept senator might have been able to say, you don't really want all your generals having to go through this process, do you? Like, he might have had some leverage if he hadn't already used it for this abortion issue that he cares very much about. There are a lot of people in Huntsville who, and not just Huntsville, but other military bases around the state, who are very unhappy with this, and people in the defense industry and in the business community who are very unhappy about this right now.
Isn't Senator Britt also sideways with Coach about that?
If you talk to her, she will tell you that she has a wonderful working relationship with Coach, and they get along very well.
So for what that's worth.
For whatever that's worth, that's what she will tell you. But I do think that not just Senator Britt, but I think the reality of it is other members of our delegation, our congressional delegation, our members in the House also are a little leery, because there is some grandstanding happening here. And Tuberville has made himself, I like to call him the tallest chicken in the barnyard, right? He has, sort of made himself a target of attention.
Yeah. Well, he had that before
Yeah.
he started this. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Kyle Whitmire. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We've been talking about Coach Tuberville and his position relative to military appointments, but we've had something happen up in North Alabama that reminds me a little bit about some things that happened with Tuberville before he became elected.
Right. And maybe is happening with Coach still. We'll see.
And Coach, you're welcome to come on. I'd love to have you.
So
I went to Auburn, by the way.
War Eagle.
He didn't, I don't think.
Yeah, he's from Arkansas, I believe.
Yeah. Well, we don't know where he's from. We don't know where he lives.
We don't know where he lives. We'll get to that. Well, which is interesting because, to your point, so we just had a lawmaker. His name is David Cole. He was a newly elected lawmaker this past election cycle. And it's pretty clear what happened. He intended to run in House District 10, which is Mike Ball's old seat. This redistricting that we were talking about happened, and the line of the districts moved just a little bit, and his house went from District 10 to District 4. Well, District 4, Mike Ball was retiring. It's going to be an open seat. District 4 already had somebody in it, another Republican incumbent, really hard to unseat, really tough race. If you want to run it, you can. Good luck. He decided he was going to run in District 10 anyway, and he says he leased some space he leased a house from a friend of his that lived down the road a little bit. Well, there have been depositions. There's been a court challenge. We now have a lot of testimony under oath. Turns out he never moved into the house. His friend never moved out of that house. He couldn't answer for sure how many bedrooms were in the house.
No power bills in his name.
Yeah, no power bills in his name. All the whole time, like his family still living right where they always have. Haven't moved out. But
so he's essentially serving a district that he doesn't live in.
Doesn't live in, which is, the law there is squishy. Where the law is not squishy is where you vote. And he registered to vote. It appears in a place where he did not live, and he voted in a place where he did not live. Well, we have a word for that. It's called voter fraud. 2 words. And there was an election challenge which sort of made its way through the court, and the Supreme Court said, well, it's really up to the House, the Alabama House of Representatives, to decide whether he's a lawfully elected lawmaker. But the AG's office surprised us and said, well, that may be up to them, but where, this voter fraud question is that's a felony.
That's a crime.
And they have brought a case against him. We're expecting that to be resolved shortly.
By way of a plea?
That is what we've heard, and again, this may change by the time everybody is hearing this at home.
Oh, yes, true.
But as we're talking, we're expecting a plea deal. Mm-hmm. That he will leave office, and there will.
Would that be a state court?
It is in state court, yes. So that has a lot of lawmakers, because there are a lot of lawmakers who have, let's just say, more than one home.
Well, that's happened even locally. I mean, we had that with Larry Langford, didn't we?
I used to get up in the morning and go out to Larry Langford's house so that I could get a picture of him, like trying to get a picture of him coming out of his house and getting in his truck in Fairfield to come to Birmingham.
To go to the apartment at Black's building?
Yeah, exactly. The apartment
Black's
downtown.
Department store?
And he, at one point he had a UPS actually tried to deliver him a package at that loft downtown, and they did what they do. They put a little sticker on the window, and I sat there and watched how many days went by, and like 3 weeks went by. Well, no one came by and pulled the sticker down. So it was clearly it wasn't. So this residency issue has been a problem in lots of different offices, lots of different places, but there are now a lot of public officials who are going, oh my God, I've never thought about the voting side of this, and are beginning to freak out about it.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What is so difficult about voting where you live?
It shouldn't be difficult.
Running for office where you live, and why would you want, if you lived in Florida, why would you want to run for senator in Alabama, for example?
Well, going back to Tuberville, and this is what you're talking about, because of the stand he's taken, I like to call him the tallest chicken in the barnyard right now. He's drawn a lot of attention to himself. He's made a lot of people, including people in his own party, angry with him. He just doesn't get along with them very well. And so a lot of people are beginning to look at these issues that we brought up when he was running for office, including where does he live? Like, he has 2 homes in Florida. He recently bought a second, in which when he signed the deed on it, or signed for the deed on it, he put the first house in Florida as his primary address. His wife has that, we call it safe paper in our business. There's paperwork there showing that this home in Santa Rosa Beach is their home. Now, Mrs. Tuberville and their son do own a home in Auburn, which is the house that Tuberville claims as his residence. But it's really unclear whether he's ever really lived there. And we can look at his campaign finance reports and see, we can kind of track his travel and see where he spends money in restaurants and stuff like that. And it's all in 30A. There's not a lot in Alabama, if any. It's restaurants along 30A is where he likes to eat.
Fascinating stuff. Keep all of these things in mind next time Election Day rolls around.
Politics in Alabama is never boring.
Thanks for being with us today. I appreciate you taking the time. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
I am blind, but I need not see. I know this road is there for me.